Alright, in this video we're going to set up the project so in the next episode we can actually implement the authentication logic. So let's get straight into the code. In the source folder, find the lib folder and create a new file inside that folder called main.css. In here, let's import a font. Alright, once you're done importing the font family, so now let's set the margin on the body to none. But first of all, let's set the color, primary text color, background color, dash dash primary color. Let's set the overflow to hidden so you can't scroll. And on every single property, we set the margin to 0. And we set the font family to the font family we imported, which is going to be Lato and sans serif. Now let's close the CSS file. And let's create a new file called types.ts. So types.ts. So let's export a type called user. So user is going to have an ID property, which is going to be a string. It's going to have a an email, and a name, which are all strings. And this will be a photo, which can be an optional property. So now we're going to export a function called validate user, which takes in a data, which is going to be type any. So they can literally input any property they want. And we're going to validate and we're going to check to see if the data is a user. So we're going to say ID is string is equal to type of data.id is equal to string. And let's do this 3 times. One for the email and one for the photo. Be email and then photo. And then we're going to return ID is string. And we're just going to return these booleans compounded. So then let's export another type called export type conversation. And let's set the name to string, a photo optionally to a string, the members to a string array. So basically the members is going to be a string of the user IDs. We're also going to set an admins, which is basically the same thing as the members, but for the admins. We're going to set the messages. So message array, and we're going to create the message type in a second. So then we set the message photos, which is going to be a nullable property. It's going to be string array. And now we're going to create a message type. It's going to contain a user ID of string, ID of string, content of string, a content type of message or image, and a created property, which is going to be the date at which this message is created, which is going to be a string. So now let's fix a bug in the validate user function. Instead of photo is a string, we say name is string. Let's rename this. So now let's close this file. Now let's create a new file called PocketBase.ts, in which we're going to export a writable store, which is going to be of type PocketBase or undefined. So by default, we're going to set it to undefined. And let's import the PocketBase from the PocketBase class from PocketBase. From PocketBase. So now here we're going to say set. So if we're not in the browser, we're going to return. And then we're going to say const PocketBase instance is equal to new PocketBase. We're going to do HTTP localhost 8090. And then we're gonna say PocketBase instance dot auth store. So we're basically gonna load the cookie of the user. So document dot cookie, and we're gonna set it to the PocketBase instance. So now let's export another writable. So const user store, but instead of writable, we're gonna set a derived store, which is gonna take in one store, which is gonna be the PB store, and then it's gonna be a type user or undefined. Let's set this to the PB. So now we say if PB is null, or if the browser, or if we're not in the browser, we set the user store to undefined, and we return. So now we say const auth model is equal to pb dot auth store dot model, and then we're gonna validate the auth model, saying that if the auth model is not a user, so validate user auth model. We're gonna set undefined. So now we're gonna set this to undefined, and then we're just gonna return. And now once we actually know that this auth model is a user, we say const collection unsubscribe is equal to pb dot collection. So we're gonna get the user's collection that we created previously in the previous episode, and we're gonna subscribe to it, saying that we want all of the users that have the ID of our auth model. So we're gonna say event so now if event dot action is equal to delete, we're gonna say pb dot auth store dot clear, and we're gonna set to undefined. Else we're gonna say pb dot auth store dot set no dot save pb dot auth store dot token. I'm gonna say record. Wait, let's rename this to E. Let's set this to E. And now we're gonna get the auth model. So const auth model is equal to pb dot auth store dot model. So let's validate the auth model. So now when this user store gets destroyed, we're gonna return a synchronous function, which we're gonna await collection unsubscribe. Oh, let's do it like this. So let's create another store of all the conversations the user has had. So we're gonna say conversation store equal to derived type of pb, and we're gonna have a type of conversation and record model array or undefined. So now for the array of the dependencies, we're just gonna have the pb array, and for the function, we're gonna have pb set and update. Let's import these types. So let's make sure this is a comma. So now if we're not in the browser or PB doesn't exist, we're going to set undefined and we're going to return. Now let's import the auth model, which is equal to pb.auth store.model. And the same thing we do here, we just validate that the auth model is actually a user. And now we're going to say conversation collection is equal to pb dot collection dot, which is going to be record model and conversation. Says the record model conversation. Now the conversation collection dot get full list. So we're gonna get the full list initially of the actual conversations that we are part of. And now we're gonna say dot then. Now we're gonna get the data and we're gonna set data. So initially we get the full list and then we set the actual data of the store to the full list. So then we listen to the conversation store. So subscribe. We're gonna say star. And the reason we're getting all of the documents is not because we actually want to get all the documents and store it locally, is because we already set the rules for the subscribe function in the conversation collection in the previous video. So by default, we're only going to get the stores or the conversations that we are actually part of. So if the data.action, we're going to create a switch. So we're going to say case create, break, and now we're going to update previous conversations. And now we're just going to return an array of data.record. And then dot 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 previous conversations or an empty array. So now if we create a new conversation and we are part of it, we just insert the data.record and we just insert the previous conversations that we've had. So I'm gonna do case delete. And let's do another update call. Previous conversations. And now we're just gonna do previous conversations or an empty array dot filter conversation dot id does not equal to data dot record dot id. And then we're just gonna do a break and then case update. So if the conversation does get updated, we're gonna get the previous conversations. And we're gonna break. Conversation found is equal to previous conversations or an empty array dot find conversation dot id data.record.id. So basically we're gonna find the actual conversation. Then we say if the conversation does not exist or previous conversations does not exist, we just return the previous conversations. So now let's return previous conversations.map conversations. No, this is supposed to be an AND operator. And let's remove this question mark. So then we say if the conversation.id is equal to data.record.id, then we're going to return data.record, and then we're just going to return conversation if it's not actually part of the record. So now let's create one new store where it's going to be cached users. So basically, every time we want to get the users, we don't actually want to create a fetch call to PocketBase every time we want to get the image. We want to cache the user, and we want to keep them as long as the session is available. So we say cached users is a derived type of PB and type of conversation store. And this is just going to be a map with the identifier being a string, and every single object maps to a user. So then for the dependencies, we say PB and conversation store. And then we say PB conversation. Then we also have the set and update property. So if we get the cached users, so let's get the current cached users, and if it is null, then we set it to this. And then we say if the conversation is null, or if the PB store is null, we set to an empty object, and let's return. So now I say const auth model is equal to pb.auth store.model. So we say if auth model, so if the auth model is not exist, then we set an empty array, and then we return. So then let's do let previous users is equal to get cached users, const user IDs result get users IDs, some previous users conversation, and auth model.id. So let's create the function. So let's say function get users IDs, and we're going to say previous users is going to be a user, is going to actually be a map with the identifier being a string that maps to a user. The second parameter be a conversations, which is going to be conversation and record model array. And the third one is just going to be the user ID string. So we're going to say let equal is equal to true. Then we're going to say const result is equal to conversations dot reduce. That's going to be a string array. And then we're going to say previous value current conversations. So we're going to say for const member of current conversation.members if the previous value dot includes member, and the previous user's member does not exist, and the member is not us. So if we are not part of the member, we're going to push this to previous users, no previous value dot push member, and we're going to say equal is equal to false. and then we're just going to return a previous value. And it's going to be an empty array as the initial property. Then we're going to return the result and if it is equal. Oh, let's set this right here. Let's make sure to fix this error. Cached users. And there's going to be conversations. Let's close this file. This function. Then we're going to get the user IDs. User IDs. User IDs result. And then we're going to check if the user ID result, if it is equal. So if the user IDs have not changed, we're not going to actually do a full query. We're just going to return. Say const users query is equal to users IDs dot reduce. User IDs dot reduce. And this is going to reduce to a string. We're going to get the previous value and the current user. Then we're going to get the query string, which is going to be ID is equal to the current user. So if the previous value is equal to an empty array, empty string, my bad, empty string, we're going to return query string. If not, we're going to return the query string interpolated with our previous value. Initial value will be an empty string. So I'm going to do pb.collection user and record model. So we're going to get the users store dot get full list, and we're going to filter through the user's query. So we're going to get that full list, and then once we queried it, we're going to get the result, and then we're going to update the previous users. And we're going to say const new users is equal to result dot reduce into a map of ID and string user. So we're going to say previous value. We're going to get the previous value and also the current user. And the initial property will be an empty array. An empty object. Say previous value of the current user.id is equal to current user. And then we're just going to return previous value. Previous value. Then we're just going to say if the previous users is null, then we return new users. If the previous user is not null, then we return the previous users concatenated with the new users. Oh, let's fix this error right here with the conversations. And let's also fix this typo that I made right over here. Let's exclude that S. And now it'll be good to go. We could close this file. And now in the app.d.ts, let's go into locals uncommented, set it to the top, and we're going to say PocketBase. So by default, the PocketBase will be the PocketBase class and also the PocketBase admin. So we're going to have two different pocket bases, one for the regular user and one for the admin. We have this separation because some actions can only be taken by admins, and we need to actually verify to see if the user has permission to do the action. So by default, this is not exported as a child property. Let's fix that. And let's close this file. And let's create a new file called the hooks.server.ts. I'm going to say export const handle is equal to async. This means asynchronous property with an event and resolve property taken in. And then we're going to say event.locals, so locals.pocketbase is equal to new instance of PocketBase. Let's make sure to fix this import. So we're going to create a try catch block. Error. So if there is an error, we just say event.locals.pocketbase.authStore.clear. So let's clear the PocketBase auth store. So then the locals.pocketbase.authStore.load from cookie event.request.get cookie. Let's do request.headers actually. And if the cookie header does not exist, we just add an empty array, an empty string. And then we're going to await event.locals.pocketbase.collection users.auth refresh. So we're going to validate to see if the actual user exists. And then we're going to do the same thing, but for the administrator. So it's going to be PocketBase admin. So this is going to be PocketBase admin.admins.auth with password. And here we're not going to do auth refresh. And instead of clearing the authentication, we're just going to throw fail 500. Let's import fail from Svelte right there. And if you want to get access to these, let's create an environment file. So .env. And we're going to create two variables just like this. Wait, let's close this error. Open this up. And now right here, just input your email and password that you chose for your admin account. Here we can import these. We can import these like this. Because we're not running SvelteKit in our terminal, it doesn't give me autocomplete. So make sure to run npm run dev if you want to get autocomplete for these auto-generated types. So then we get auto import right now, and you see it works. So now let's do pb.set to event.locals.pocketbase, no, not pocketbase admin, to just the standard PocketBase. So we're going to say the response is equal to await resolve event, and then we're going to say response dot headers dot set cookie. So we're going to tell the browser set the cookie of the locals.pocketbase dot auth store dot export to cookie, and we're going to say the same site is equal to true, secure is equal to false, and we're also going to say HTTP only is equal to false. And then we're just going to return the response. By the way, in the hooks.server.ts file, let's just await the auth with password because this is a asynchronous function and we need to await it for it to be actually valid. And that's it. I'm really grateful for you guys watching. I hope you have a great day. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.